Coming back from a trip, I found my bags on the sidewalk with a note. If you want to stay here, we have the garage. Signed, your loving daughter-in-law. Before the taxi arrived, I called the bank. I was the one paying the mortgage. Check. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I stared at my 4 suitcases neatly lined up on the sidewalk, unable to process what I was seeing. After a week visiting my sister in Colorado, all I wanted was to sink into my favorite armchair with a cup of tea. Instead, I found myself locked, out of my own home. Rain clouds gathered overhead as I picked up the note tucked under the handle of my largest suitcase. The handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, slanted letters that always seemed to be in a hurry. If you want to stay here, we have the garage. Your dear daughter-in-law. My hands trembled as I read the words again. I'd lived in this house for 35 years. Richard and I had built it together when Gregory was just a baby. We'd planted every tree in the yard, selected every fixture, painted every wall. After Richard passed away 2 years ago, I'd agreed to sign the house over to Gregory and Vanessa, legally at least. But I was the one still secretly paying the mortgage. I fumbled for my phone and dialed the bank before the taxi even pulled away, needing confirmation of what I already knew. Yes, Mrs. Wilson, we show your automatic payment of $1,867 went through last Friday as scheduled, the customer service representative confirmed. Thank you, I whispered, ending the call. A heavy drop of rain splashed on my forehead as I stood. There, 68 years old, staring at my belongings on the sidewalk. The sky opened up then, as if giving me permission to break down too. I should have seen this coming. The sideways glances between Gregory and Vanessa whenever I mentioned redecorating my kitchen. The not-so-subtle comments about senior communities, where I wouldn't have to worry about yard work. The way they'd rearranged the living room while I was visiting my sister last Christmas, moving my reading chair to the basement. Small things that weren't so small after all. The garage door was unlocked. Inside, a twin mattress had been placed against one wall, with a small nightstand and lamp beside it. My clothes had been hung on a portable rack. My books, photos, and keepsakes were stacked in cardboard boxes labeled Mom's Stuff in Vanessa's handwriting. I sank onto the mattress, the concrete floor cold beneath my feet. Through the small window, I could see the house where I'd raised my son, buried my husband, and apparently lost my place in the world. My phone buzzed with a text from Gregory. Mom, we need the space. Vanessa has been asking for a home office for months. The garage apartment has everything you need. Don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult. As if I were the problem. I'd never been one to cry easily, but the tears came then, silent and hot against my cheeks. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up with Gregory when he had asthma attacks as a child. The second job I'd taken to pay for his college when Richard's business hit a rough patch. The weekends I'd spent watching the grandkids so Gregory and Vanessa could have couple time. And now I was reduced to a burden, an inconvenience to be tucked away in the garage. I didn't respond to Gregory's text. Instead, I called Martha, my oldest friend. Audrey? What's wrong? She asked, immediately sensing the catch in my voice. I need a place to stay, I managed to say, the words sticking in my throat like shards of glass. They've put me in the garage. Martha didn't ask for explanations. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said. As I waited, sitting on that thin mattress surrounded by the boxed-up remnants of my life, I made a decision. This house had been my heart for 35 years. I'd poured everything into it, my love, my savings, my dreams, and now they thought they could simply push me aside? The garage door rattled as the rain intensified outside. I looked at my trembling hands and slowly curled them into fists. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I wasn't just Gregory's mother or Richard's widow. I was Audrey Wilson, and I was done being invisible. Martha's spare bedroom wasn't much, but at least it had a door that locked and windows that let in actual sunlight. After 3 days at the Sunset Motel, a name that felt eerily appropriate for this chapter of my life, I was grateful to be somewhere that didn't charge by the night. "You can stay as long as you need," Martha insisted, setting a mug of coffee in front of me. "Jim and I rattle around in this house like 2 peas in a barrel since the kids moved out." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. "I appreciate it, but this can't be permanent. I need to figure out what to do about the house." "You mean your house?" Martha corrected, her eyes narrowing. "The one you're still paying for." Martha had been my friend for over 30 years. She'd known Richard, had watched Gregory grow up, had been there through the good times and bad. And unlike my own son, she remembered who I was before I became invisible. "I keep thinking about when it all started to change," I said, staring into my coffee. "After Richard died, I thought giving Gregory and Vanessa the house would help them. They'd just had Emma. Money was tight. And they took advantage," Martha finished. The memories surfaced like bruises I'd been avoiding pressing on. 6 months after the funeral, Vanessa had started rearranging the house, claiming it needed updating. My suggestions were dismissed. My belongings migrated to closets, then to the basement, then to storage bins. You know what Vanessa said when I objected to her throwing out Richard's fishing gear? "We need to move forward, not live in a museum." As if my husband's memory was just clutter to be cleared away. Martha reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What about Gregory? Surely he stood up for you." I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. Gregory said I was being difficult, that I needed to adapt to the new normal. His new normal apparently meant forgetting his father and sidelining his mother. The control had been so gradual I barely noticed it happening. First, they took over the kitchen, criticizing my cooking. Then came complaints about my TV shows being too loud, my friends visiting too often, my gardening taking up too much of their yard. Each surrender on my part only emboldened them further. The worst part is, I enabled it all, I admitted. I kept paying the mortgage because I was afraid they'd struggle financially. I wanted to help them, to be useful, to be loved, Martha said softly. The truth of her words stung. I'd been buying my place in that house, in my own son's life, one mortgage payment at a time. My phone buzzed with a text from Gregory. "Mom, when are you coming to get the rest of your things? We need to convert the garage for Emma's playroom." I showed Martha the message, my hand trembling slightly. That ungrateful little... She bit off the word. "Audrey, there's something you should know. I didn't want to tell you because I knew it would hurt, but you deserve the truth." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" Last month at book club, Vanessa was there. She'd had a few glasses of wine and started talking about their plans. "They're putting the house on the market, Audrey. They want to buy that new construction in Oakwood Hills." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "They're selling my house?" "They think it's their house," Martha said gently. "And technically, legally, it is. But morally? That's another story." I thought of the 35 years of memories embedded in those walls. Richard and I bringing baby Gregory home. Birthday parties. Christmas mornings. The garden Richard had built for our 20th anniversary. My husband's last breaths in our bedroom, surrounded by the life we'd created together, and they were going to sell it all to strangers without a second thought. "What am I going to do?" I whispered. Martha's eyes hardened with resolve. "First, you're going to stop paying their mortgage. Let's see how quickly their plans change when the bank starts calling." "But what about my credit?" "Second," she continued, "you're going to talk to my nephew Brian. He's a lawyer who specializes in elder rights. There has to be some legal recourse here." "I'm not elderly," I protested weakly. Martha arched an eyebrow. "You're old enough to be treated with respect, which is not what's happening here." She was right. For 2 years I'd been shrinking myself, becoming smaller and quieter to avoid being a burden. And where had it gotten me? Evicted from my own home, my belongings packed in boxes, my existence reduced to an inconvenience. As the reality of my situation crystallized, something else emerged from beneath the hurt and betrayal, a slow-burning anger that felt almost foreign after years of accommodation. "Okay," I said, straightening my shoulders. "Let's talk to Brian." Martha squeezed my hand. "That's my girl. And Audrey, remember who you are. You're not just Gregory's mother or Richard's widow. You're Audrey Wilson. And it's about time everyone remembered that." For the first time since finding my suitcases on the sidewalk, I felt a flicker of something that might have been hope. Or maybe it was determination. Either way, I wasn't going down without a fight. Brian, Martha's nephew, was not what I expected. With his jeans and Henley shirt, he looked more like a college professor than a lawyer. But his eyes were sharp as he reviewed the mortgage statements I'd brought. "So you've been making payments on a house that's no longer in your name," he said, frowning. "And your son and daughter-in-law have been living there rent-free while planning to sell it?" Put so bluntly, it sounded absurd even to me. "Yes." "And they evicted you to the garage?" I nodded, embarrassment flushing my cheeks. How had I allowed things to reach this point? "You have options," Brian said. "The financial arrangements could constitute a verbal contract. At minimum, you could sue for recovery of the mortgage payments you've made since the property transfer." Martha, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up. "She needs to confront them first. Make them understand what they've done." Brian looked skeptical, but I knew Martha was right. Before taking legal action against my own son, I needed to give him one last chance to make things right. That's how I found myself standing on the porch of my own home the next day, my heart pounding as I rang the doorbell. I'd lived in this house since before Gregory was born, yet here I was, a visitor requiring permission to enter. Vanessa answered, her surprise quickly masked with a tight smile. "Audrey, we weren't expecting you." "I need to speak with you and Gregory," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Of course. Come in." The living room had changed again since I'd left. My reading lamp was gone, replaced by a modern floor lamp I didn't recognize. The family photos I'd arranged on the mantel had been rearranged, with several of Richard now missing. Gregory emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I came to talk about the house," I said. "Martha told me you're planning to sell it." Their exchanged glance confirmed everything. "We were going to tell you," Gregory said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Once everything was finalized." "Finalized?" I echoed. This was my home for 35 years. Your father and I built this house. We raised you here. Vanessa sighed dramatically. Audrey, we understand you have sentimental attachments, but we need to do what's best for our family now. Your family, I repeated. And what am I? An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Mom, Gregory finally said, his tone patronizing. You signed the house over to us. We appreciate everything you've done, but it's our property now. We get to decide what happens to it. I took a deep breath. I've been paying the mortgage for the past 2 years. Every month, $1,167 from my account to keep a roof over your heads. Another glance between them. They'd known. That was your choice, Vanessa said coolly. We never asked you to do that. My hands began to tremble. I did it to help you. Because that's what family does. And we're grateful, Gregory said, though his tone suggested anything but. But that doesn't change the legal situation. The house is ours. So my 35 years here, my financial support, my role in this family, none of that matters? Gregory shrugged, looking uncomfortable but unmoved. Mom, you're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. We can help you find a nice senior apartment. I don't need a nice senior apartment, I snapped. I need my son to show an ounce of decency and respect. Vanessa stepped forward, her smile tight. Audrey, I think you're getting emotional. Perhaps we should continue this conversation another time. That's when I knew, truly knew, that there was no fixing this. The son I'd raised, the boy I'd loved with every fiber of my being, was gone. In his place stood a stranger who saw me as nothing more than an obligation, a problem to be managed. I've stopped the automatic mortgage payments, I said quietly. Gregory's expression changed instantly. You what? If you want to sell my home, you'll need to pay for it yourselves. You can't do that. Vanessa's voice rose. What about our credit? We have plans. Yes, I said. I hear Oakwood Hills is lovely this time of year. Gregory's face darkened. Mom, the house was Dad's gift to me. You know that. It was never really yours. The words hit me like a physical blow. Never really yours. 35 years of my life, dismissed in 5 words. I see, I said, my voice barely audible. Well, then I suppose there's nothing left to discuss. I turned to leave, my legs unsteady beneath me. As I reached the door, I paused, looking back at the son, who no longer saw me. Your father would be ashamed of you, Gregory. And for the first time, so am I. I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. The spring air felt cool against my hot cheeks as I made my way down the driveway, away from the home that had never truly been mine. Something had broken inside me today, but something else, something stronger, had been forged in its place. You did what? Martha asked, her coffee mug suspended halfway to her lips. I stopped the payments, I repeated, still shocked by my own boldness. I told them if they want to sell the house, they'll need to pay for it themselves. Martha set her mug down with a definitive thunk. Well, it's about time. Brian, who had insisted on joining us after my confrontation, looked less enthusiastic. It's a good first step, but we need to protect you legally. If your name isn't on the title anymore, you could be liable for the missed payments without any claim to the property. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was fading, leaving room for doubt to creep in. Have I made a terrible mistake? No, Martha said firmly. You've finally stood up for yourself. Brian tapped his pen against his legal pad. Let's be strategic about this. I'm going to contact the bank tomorrow, explain the situation, and see what options we have. In the meantime, you need to gather every shred of evidence that shows you've been making these payments. I nodded, thinking of the meticulous financial records Richard had taught me to keep. At least I had that. What about my things still at the house? I asked. Martha squared her shoulders. I'll go with you to collect them. If they give us any trouble, I still remember how to swing the softball bat from our community league days. Despite everything, I found myself laughing. Martha had always been fiercely protective, even back in high school when she'd confronted the girls who'd made fun of my secondhand clothes. I don't know what I'd do without you both, I said, my voice catching. Brian reached over and squeezed my hand. You're not alone in this, Mrs. Wilson. We'll make sure they don't take advantage of you anymore. The next morning, a call came from First Federal Bank. I answered with trepidation, expecting questions about the missed mortgage payment. Mrs. Wilson, this is Trevor Phillips from the mortgage department. We've received a request to discuss the situation with your property on Maple Avenue. I gripped the phone tighter. Yes, that's correct. I understand you've been making payments on a property that's no longer in your name. Our records show consistent payments from your account for the past 26 months. Yes, I confirmed, but I've decided to stop those payments. There was a pause, then, Mrs. Wilson, I don't normally do this, but would you be willing to come into the branch to discuss this further? I think there might be options you haven't considered. 2 hours later, I sat across from Trevor, a kind-faced man about my son's age, as he explained something called an equitable lien. Essentially, by consistently paying the mortgage on a property from which you derive no benefit, you may have established an interest in the property, even without being on the title. Hope fluttered in my chest. What does that mean exactly? It means you could potentially place a lien on the property for the amount you've contributed. They wouldn't be able to sell without addressing that lien. For the first time since finding my suitcases on the sidewalk, I felt a glimmer of control returning. There's something else, Trevor said, lowering his voice slightly. Your son called this morning, quite upset about the missed payment. He seemed unaware of how mortgages work. I wasn't surprised. Gregory had always relied on others to handle the practical aspects of life. First Richard and me, now Vanessa. And apparently my monthly payments. What did you tell him? That missed payments affect credit scores and could eventually lead to foreclosure proceedings, Trevor said. He didn't take it well. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Gregory. Mom, we need to talk about the mortgage, ASAP. I showed Trevor the message. What would you like to do, Mrs. Wilson? He asked. It was such a simple question, but no one had asked me that in years. What did I want? Not just regarding the house, but with my life? I thought of the confrontation with Gregory and Vanessa, their casual dismissal of my contributions, their assumption that I would continue to finance their dreams while being relegated to the garage. I want what's rightfully mine, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Trevor nodded, respect evident in his expression. Then let's make that happen. That afternoon, armed with information from Trevor and legal advice from Brian, I took another unexpected step in my new life. I applied for a job. The help wanted sign in the window of Rosie's Cafe had caught my eye as I walked back to Martha's house. You want to wait tables? Martha asked, eyebrows raised when I told her. I was a waitress all through college, I reminded her, and I need my own income, my own life. I can't just hide out in your spare room forever. Martha considered this. Well, Rosie's does have the best pie in town. 2 days later, I had my first shift. My feet ached and my back screamed by the end of it. But the tips in my pocket were mine, earned by my own hands. The simple satisfaction of that was something I hadn't felt in years. When I returned to Martha's, exhausted but oddly invigorated, there were 6 missed calls from Gregory on my phone. I listened to the first voicemail. Mom, the bank called about the mortgage. They mentioned something about a lien? What are you doing? Call me back immediately. I deleted it without listening to the others. For once, Gregory would have to wait for my convenience, not the other way. Around. Martha brought me a glass of wine and sat beside me on the porch swing. How does it feel? She asked softly. I considered the question, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. It feels like I'm finally waking up, I said. Like I've been sleepwalking since Richard died. And now you're Audrey again, Martha finished for me. I nodded, raising my glass in a small toast. To Audrey Wilson. It's nice to finally meet her. After 3 weeks of working at Rosie's Cafe, I had settled into a routine that felt surprisingly comfortable. My tips were modest but steady, and the physical work kept my mind occupied. More importantly, I had a purpose again. Somewhere to be. People who relied on me. A life that was entirely my own. Which is why the sight of Gregory standing awkwardly by the hostess stand sent a jolt through me. Mom, he said, his voice softer than I'd heard it in years. Can we talk? Rosa, the owner, caught my eye from behind the counter. Take 15 if you need it, Audrey. I nodded and led Gregory to a corner booth, away from my regular customers, who had become something like friends. You look different, he said, studying me. I smoothed down my apron. I am different. Gregory shifted uncomfortably. Mom, about the house. I'm not discussing that here, I interrupted. If that's why you came, you're wasting your time. Please, he said, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. Vanessa and we're in trouble. The bank called about a lien, and our credit score is dropping because of the missed payments. I observed my son, his expensive watch, his carefully styled hair, the subtle scent of cologne that probably cost more than I made in a day at Rosie's. Everything about him screamed entitlement and comfort, a life cushioned by other sacrifices. What do you want from me, Gregory? He leaned forward. We need you to lift the lien and resume the payments, just until we can sell the house. The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. And what do I get in return? We'll make sure you're taken care of, he said, as if offering a great kindness. There's a really nice senior community in Westbrook. Stop, I said, raising my hand. I'm not interested in being taken care of. I've been taking care of myself and you for years. Mom, be reasonable. You can't keep working here. He gestured around the cafe dismissively. You're almost 60. 58, I corrected. And I'm doing just fine. Gregory's face hardened slightly, his mask of contrition slipping. Fine. What do you want? A percentage of the sale? I studied him, this stranger wearing my son's face. I want my home back. He blinked, then laughed nervously. That's not possible. We've already made an offer on the house in Oakwood Hills. Not my problem. Gregory's expression darkened. It is your problem if you want a relationship with your granddaughter. With any of us. The threat hung in the air between us. Ugly and explicit. My own son was using my love for his daughter as leverage, Are you threatening to keep Emma from me? He had the decency to look slightly ashamed, but pressed on. I'm just saying that families need to support each other. Vanessa and I have a plan for our future, and you're standing in the way. The way I stood in the way when I paid your college tuition? Or when I watched Emma every weekend so you and Vanessa could have couple time? Or when I signed over the house and kept making payments so you could save for that boat you bought last summer? Gregory flushed. That's not fair. No, I agreed. It's not. My break was almost over. I slid out of the booth and stood straightening my apron. I need to get back to work. Mom, please. Gregory's voice cracked slightly. We need this. The house in Oakwood Hills is perfect. We can't lose it. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to climb into my lap with scraped knees, looking to me to make everything better. But that boy was gone. In his place sat a man who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. I'll think about it, I said finally. But I need something in writing from you and Vanessa first. Meet me at Brian Wallace's office tomorrow at 2 p.m. Relief washed over Gregory's face. Thank you, Mom. You won't regret this. As he left, I wondered if I already did. The next day, I arrived at Brian's office early, my stomach in knots. I'd barely slept, going over and over the decision I'd reached in the middle of the night. Gregory and Vanessa arrived precisely at 2, both dressed as if for a business meeting. Vanessa's smile was tight but triumphant as they took seats across from Brian's desk. Thank you for coming, Brian began formally. Mrs. Wilson has considered your request regarding the property on Maple Avenue. We appreciate that, Vanessa interjected smoothly. We're certain we can reach an agreement that benefits everyone. Brian slid a document across the desk. This is what Mrs. Wilson proposes. Gregory picked it up, scanning the contents. His expression shifted from hopeful to confused to angry in seconds. What is this? He demanded. That, I said calmly, is my condition for lifting the lien. I will resume mortgage payments, but the house will be sold to me, not to strangers. Vanessa snatched the paper from Gregory's hands. This is ridiculous. You want us to sell you the house for the remaining mortgage balance? It's worth at least 3 times that. It's worth exactly what I've put into it, I replied. 35 years of payments, repairs, and improvements. Gregory's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You can't do this. The house is legally ours. With a lien against it, Brian pointed out, which significantly complicates any potential sale. We'll fight this, Vanessa said, her voice cold. We'll get our own lawyer. I nodded, having expected this reaction. You can try, but the legal proceedings will take time, months, maybe years. Your credit scores will continue to suffer, and that dream house in Oakwood Hills will go to someone else. The truth of this sank in visibly. Gregory and Vanessa had overextended themselves, counting on a quick sale of my house to finance their upgrade. You planned this all along, Gregory accused, his voice barely above a whisper. From the moment we moved you to the garage. No, I said quietly. I just finally stopped allowing myself to be used. Vanessa stood abruptly. We need to discuss this privately. As they stepped out, Brian gave me an approving nod. You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Wilson. I wasn't so sure. The look of betrayal in Gregory's eyes haunted me. Had I become as calculating and cold as they were? Before I could dwell on it further, the office door opened. Gregory and Vanessa returned, faces grim but resigned. We'll accept your offer, Gregory said stiffly. But I hope you realize what this means for our relationship. I met my son's gaze steadily, I do. And I hope someday you'll realize what it meant when you put my suitcases on the sidewalk. The first night back in my house, I couldn't sleep. I wandered from room to room, touching familiar walls, tracing the doorframe where we'd marked Gregory's height each year, standing in the kitchen where Richard and I had danced on our 30th anniversary. It had been 3 months since the confrontation in Brian's office. 3 months of legal paperwork, of tense exchanges with Gregory and Vanessa as they reluctantly moved out, of rebuilding my life piece by piece. The house felt both familiar and strange. Vanessa had repainted several rooms in trendy grays and whites, removing the warm yellows and blues Richard and I had chosen. The kitchen had been remodeled with sleek, impersonal appliances, but underneath the cosmetic changes, the bones of the home remained, the squeaky third step on the staircase, the way sunlight filtered through the bay window in the afternoons, the slight tilt to the floor in the upstairs hallway that Richard could never quite fix. I stood in the master bedroom, now empty of furniture except for the bed I'd brought from Martha's spare room. This room, where Richard and I had shared our lives, where he had taken his last breath, felt sacred somehow. "I'm home," I whispered, as if he might hear me. The silence that answered wasn't lonely, just peaceful. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. The doorbell rang the next morning as I was unpacking my modest collection of dishes. I opened it to find Martha holding a pot of soup and a bottle of wine. "Housewarming," she announced, marching past me into the kitchen. "Though I suppose it's technically a homecoming." I laughed, following her. "It feels like both, honestly." Martha set her offerings on the counter and turned to survey the kitchen. "Good Lord, what did that woman do to your beautiful oak cabinets?" "Painted them gray and replaced all the handles with something called brushed nickel," I said. "Apparently, oak is passé," Martha snorted. "You know what's passé? Throwing your mother-in-law out on the street." We both laughed, though the hurt beneath the humor was still raw. "Have you heard from them?" Martha asked as she helped me unpack. I shook my head. "Not since the closing. Gregory made it clear that I'd chosen the house over them." "That's not what happened, and you know it," Martha said firmly. "You chose self-respect. There's a difference." I wasn't sure Gregory would ever see it that way, but I had made peace with my decision. The alternative, continuing to let them use me while treating me like an afterthought, was no longer acceptable. "Well," Martha said, opening the wine, "to new beginnings." We clinked glasses, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this woman who had stood by me when my own family hadn't. The following weeks brought a steady rhythm to my days. Mornings at Rosie's Cafe, afternoons spent slowly restoring the house to something that felt like mine again. I didn't have the money to replace all of Vanessa's modern updates, but I could add touches that brought back the warmth. Colorful throw pillows, family photos returned to the mantel. Richard's fishing gear hung proudly in the den. One Saturday morning, I was planting tulip bulbs in the front garden when a familiar car pulled into the driveway. My heart jumped to my throat as Gregory stepped out, looking uncertain. He stood awkwardly at the edge of the garden. "The flowers look nice," I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Dad always loved tulips," he continued, glancing around the yard. "I remember him planting them every fall." I brushed dirt from my hands. "What brings you here, Gregory?" He shifted uncomfortably. We didn't get the house in Oakwood Hills." I wasn't surprised. Their credit had likely been too damaged by the missed mortgage payments. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, meaning it despite everything. Gregory looked down at his shoes, expensive loafers now gathering dust from the garden. We found an apartment instead. It's small, but it's teaching us some perspective, I guess. I waited, sensing there was more. Vanessa's pregnant again, he said finally. The baby's due in January. Congratulations, I said softly, wondering if this news was meant to hurt me, to remind me of what I'd be missing. Gregory met my eyes for the first time. Emma asks about you. She doesn't understand why we don't visit Grandma anymore. A pain, sharp and sweet, lanced through my heart. I missed my granddaughter fiercely. She's welcome here any time, I said. So are you. Gregory nodded, then hesitated. Mom, I've been thinking about everything, about what happened. I held my breath, not daring to hope for real understanding. I'm not saying we handled things well, he continued, choosing his words carefully. But you chose a house over your family. I don't know if I can forgive that. My momentary hope deflated. He still didn't see it. I didn't choose a house, Gregory, I said quietly. I chose not to be erased. There's a difference. He frowned, clearly not agreeing. Anyway, I thought you should know about the baby, and maybe Emma could visit sometimes, if that's okay. It wasn't an apology, not even close. But it was a small opening, a tiny crack in the wall between us. I'd like that, I said. After Gregory left, I sat on the porch swing, processing the encounter. The relationship with my son was damaged, perhaps irreparably. He still couldn't see how deeply he had hurt me, how fundamentally he had betrayed my trust. But he had come today, had reached out, however inadequately. It was a start, not an ending. That evening, Martha and her husband Jim came over, along with Rosa from the cafe and Brian and his wife. We sat in my backyard, the same yard where I'd hosted Gregory's high school graduation party, where Richard and I had celebrated anniversaries, where life had unfolded in all its messy glory. As twilight settled around us, the conversation flowing, easily among these people who had become my chosen family, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. A toast, Martha declared, raising her glass, to Audrey Wilson, who reminds us all that it's never too late to reclaim your life. Everyone clinked glasses, smiling warmly at me. Later, as the stars emerged in the clear summer sky, I sat alone, on the porch, listening to the familiar creaks and sighs of my house. I thought of Richard, of the life we'd built, of the son we'd raised who had somehow lost his way. I thought of the woman I'd become in these past months, stronger, more determined, unwilling to be diminished for anyone's convenience. The house. Around me wasn't just walls and a roof. It was a testament to survival, to resilience, to the quiet, unstoppable power of a woman who had finally learned to put herself first. I was home. Not just in this house, but in my own life. And for the first time in years, that life stretched before me full of possibilities that were entirely my own.